Welcome to Out of the Dark. We have been talking about how difficult it might be for some people to share their stories, not just with us, but with anybody. Here are 5 reasons why it's okay for you to tell the truth, no matter who is offended by it. Number 1. It's okay to tell your story because if you wait to tell your story until no one will be made uncomfortable by it, it will never be told. Your story will almost definitely hurt innocent people who are connected in some way to your abuser, such as spouses, children, or grandchildren. When survivors tell their stories, a lot of people, even besides the abuser, won't like it. Some people will be negatively affected. Some people will feel attacked. Some people will feel afraid. Some will feel betrayed. And some will feel that you have taken something from them or destroyed their happiness. But that's not true. Only the abuser is responsible for the damage done to his or her friends, family, and ministry. It's not your job to protect them from your trauma, period. Number 2. It's okay to tell your story because it can bring healing and break shame. Telling our stories of abuse is often a significant part of the trauma healing process. When we put words to our experiences and tell who we want to tell, even if it's public, we lay a strong foundation for healing. Telling your story allows you as a survivor to take control of the narrative and also to correct false information given to you and to others. It's not just about telling the truth to others either. It's about telling the truth to ourselves. The story we often tell ourselves about abuse in the early days is damaging and distorted. We might think, it was my fault. If I had just done blank, I could have salvaged the situation. What happened to me was probably not as damaging as I'm making it out to be. I will never be able to recover and live a whole, happy life. None of these things are true. In reclaiming our story, we gain ownership over the narrative. We are able to bring our trauma in line with reality and share it constructively for our good. Sharing our trauma also breaks the power of shame over both tellers and listeners. Intrinsically, every person who has ever been abused feels shame. Shame dissipates when the survivor talks about it, and their disclosure is then met with belief, acceptance, love, and support. Even the shame of fellow survivors can decrease simply through listening to someone else's story, because they then know they're not alone. For many survivors, abuse becomes their norm. We believe that control, shame, and fear are standard in relationships. Likewise, when we tell stories of abuse, it can be easy to minimize or normalize our trauma. But abuse isn't normal. In talking about it out loud and seeing others react with appropriate shock and horror, we can hear that it's wrong and abnormal, dark, and crazy. Number 3. It's okay to tell your story because it shines a light into dark places, creates healthier communities, and empowers others to break the silence. There's an enforced silence surrounding abuse which not only harms our communities, but is also an additional abuse of victims. In pressuring victims to stay silent or to tell the story in a certain way or at a certain time, we re-traumatize them and add to their shame and pain. When someone is abused, their power to speak is taken away by an abuser. So if survivors themselves are not allowed to determine when and how they tell their stories, we once again empower the perpetrator and disempower the victim. And we breed toxicity and deception in our communities, which hurts everyone. Breaking the silence is a threat to the status quo, and it's also a threat to abusers. Victims of abuse are often threatened with horrible things if they talk about what's happening to them. Exposing the truth is a declaration of freedom and empowerment for survivors, and both are essential steps toward healing. When you expose abuse, it loses its power over you. Secrets and shame are powerful. When they're uncovered, they lose their authority. The beauty of a publicly told story is that secrecy and shame are immediately weakened, and not just personally, but also communally. We will all be better for it. In naming our trauma, we also undermine the isolation victims often feel. Isolation is a potent catalyst for pain, self-destruction, and even death. Yet, connection with other human beings is an even more potent catalyst for health, personal growth, and life. When we tell our stories, we feel less alone, crazy, and confused, and more grounded, sane, and aware. It's profoundly validating for survivors to hear another person's story and find their own story reflected in it. Sometimes it gives us the extra shot of courage we need to start our own journey of speaking and healing and bringing dark to light. Number 4. It's okay to tell our story to bring awareness that abuse is a serious problem in our society and to promote understanding of the different types of abuse. When we refuse to see the abuse epidemic in our society, we enable abusers and bolster abusive systems. In telling the truth about what we're facing, we refuse to allow people and communities to live in denial. Abuse flourishes when people, families, workplaces, and religious institutions minimize abuse and make excuses instead of changes. When we don't speak up, it becomes easier for others to deny that there's a problem. When we do, we force people to confront hard truths. Oppression is undermined when we clearly name abuse, expose oppressors, and take action. Change begins with acknowledgement. My story is important. Your story is important. Every survivor's story is important, and each experience is different from every other survivor's experience. All stories are worth telling. Further, abuse is not a monolith. As mentioned previously, there are many different types of abuse. All of them warrant exposure and discussion. In sharing our unique experiences, we bring greater awareness of the many different forms of abuse: physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, etc. Some kinds of abuse are punishable by law: sexual assault of a minor, physical assault, etc. But abuse can also be subtle and even socially accepted, like religious abuse, sexual advances at work, etc. Sharing our unique experiences can help others identify their abuse. Some victims don't even know they're being abused. For example, some people don't know that being patted on the bottom by a boss is sexual assault. It helps when someone else names that violation as abuse. It's always our choice as to how much we want to share and whether or not we want to include concrete details when we talk about abuse. We should only ever share the parts of our experience that we want to share. Describing our abuse in detail in safe spaces can 1. Be freeing, 2. Help expose the severity of the problem, and 3. Aid other victims. Number 5. It's okay to tell your story to create safer communities. Your story could help others find protection from a current active abuser. If your abuser has gone on to hurt others, exposing him might help someone else identify and escape abuse. In sharing what happened to us only when we feel safe and emotionally ready, we can help ensure that other women and girls are safe too, as well as men and boys, and that, when abuse does tragically happen, victims are heard and believed. We can help prepare our communities to respond better in the future. Now, I want to be extremely clear here. A survivor's safety and mental health always comes first. No one is obligated to name an abuser publicly, and we are not responsible for the behaviors and past, present, or future crimes of perpetrators. They alone are culpable. But many survivors go on to become advocates, sharing their stories to raise awareness and create safer communities. I am thankful for their courageous efforts. We would like to thank Connie Baker from CBE International for writing up this article and these 5 steps that survivors can use to gather courage to share their stories. We really appreciate the article written. And whether you decide to share here on our channel or somewhere else, we just want to encourage you either way. And we hope you guys benefited from this article, and we hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for listening.
If you have a story of narcissistic abuse and would like to share it with us in order to help others or to get advice, encouragement, or support, please send your stories to our email at outofthedark.crips@gmail.com. Until next time, we hope you are living a healthier and more life-affirming existence. And thank you for watching.